Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. So good to have you today. Episode 64, and we bring on Charles McConnell from Rice University, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. We really kind of go, I don't want to say all over the place because that's not appropriate, but we talk about energy in large and how the U.S. is going to potentially shape the geopolitical future with its capacity to buy and sell oil on the global market and a lot of other stuff. And we talk about third world development. It was a really good show. A couple things of note. Be sure to go check out what they have going on at Rice. We were offline. Chuck told me that there is a course that they have out that is online for people who are interested in learning about the oil and gas market. And so we'll try to link to that in the show notes or put a spot on the website for you as well. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Charles McDonnell, the Executive Director of Rice University's Energy and Environment Initiative. Well, Chuck, it's a pleasure to have someone with your kind of experience on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Well, kind of set the table for us. What got you interested in the topic of energy and the energy industry in general?
Well, I've been involved with energy my whole life. Coming out of college nearly 40 years ago, worked for a multinational industrial gas company for 31 of those years and have had a keen interest in energy, whether it's oil and gas, petrochemicals, or just the generation of electric power and the distribution of that to people around the world, but specifically in many of the industries that not only I've worked in, but I've served. And had a chance to be involved with not just the business, but also the technology development associated with energy, and ultimately in many of the policy areas as well. So to me, it's a fascinating part of our world, and I could argue maybe the most critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Energy kind of becomes one of these things we debate about a lot of things, but it almost gets lost in the argument how actually vital it is to just life as we understand it. Now, you also worked for the Department of Energy as Assistant Secretary of Energy, and that's a department that's really in the news a lot, especially with Rick Perry taking over and President Trump. What was your experience like there? And, was it one of these bureaucracies that you go, oh, man, everything just kind of gets bogged down there? Or are you more favorable of your time at the DOE?
Well, I've had the good fortune of knowing Governor Perry, now Secretary of Energy Perry, for nearly 20 years from the work going on here in Texas over the years. And I felt very fortunate to have had that relationship. From the standpoint of the position at the Department of Energy, I actually was invited in by the Obama administration to be the man responsible for fossil fuels. And that was a little bit of an interesting dance because fossil fuels really were not considered to be the favorite of that administration. Coal, oil, natural gas, et cetera. But I believed it was an opportunity to serve from the standpoint of advanced technologies, transformational technologies in fossil fuels that could not only make the fuel more abundant, secure, and affordable, but specifically also to make it more environmentally responsible. And I think that's where the key to energy sustainability is in terms of harmonizing that affordability, availability, and ultimately the environmental responsibility. I found it an honor to serve. I wouldn't give back a day of the 2 years that I spent in that job, but I will tell you that Washington, D.C. is a bit of a meat grinder as well, and I'm delighted to be here at Rice now.
Yeah, I can imagine that. That's a place that I think I want to visit but not stay. So let's talk about energy sustainability and security. One of the things that you hear, at least in the political realm, is U.S. needs to be energy independent. We want to get our dependence off of foreign oil. And all these things, they sound very abstract, and it's kind of hard to put a finger on exactly what someone might mean when they talk about energy independence or energy security. It seems that we see in the news, especially if you get away from the politicians and the mainstream media, there's a lot of talk about how energy should be done, but it's very abstract, and there's not a lot of defined plans on how to get there. How do we kind of cut through that and understand this is what we need to, these are kind of our real sustainable targets that we want to approach, and how do we approach those?
Well, couple of terms you've mentioned, and maybe I'll hit those first and then lean right into your question. I think the idea of energy independence is a coined phrase. It's been around for a while, and it suggests that we're not at all dependent or interlinked with the rest of the world. That's frankly a travesty to even think that way. The world is globally connected. It's so important in terms of geopolitics and any number of other really important internation relationships. So I don't think the word is independence. I think the word is secure. We need to have abundant, available supplies, optionality around those supplies to deliver the most affordable and cost-competitive energy to our citizens, and also, frankly, to provide stability in this world that so often is disrupted, impacted by geopolitical circumstances, and energy often can be a lever in all of that. But I think to your question, more specifically, and something that I believe this administration, at least what I've seen so far, is stopping all of the apologies for our energy abundance here in this country. Not feeling bad about it, but actually looking at our resources and the gifts that we have here and the natural resources to be energy dominant, to actually have a position in the world where we are able to meet the needs of not only our citizens, but play a role globally that can be quite responsible and important, so that we're able to look at our coal, but also specifically our oil, natural gas, our technologies, all of the things associated with energy that can make such a difference around the world. And not just picking the countries that we like or that support us, but looking at energy poverty as an overwhelming and overarching issue that the world's going to deal with in the next 50 years. You know, the world's population's going to nearly double in the next 40, 50 years. And in that whole time, the demand for energy will likely double or maybe go beyond that as we become more and more energy intensive. And so this idea that we're all going to become conservation focused, we're going to cut our energy demands, et cetera, I don't believe that's going to happen. I believe what will happen is we'll continue to be more and more thirsty for energy. And our challenge will be to meet those needs in an environmentally responsible manner. And that's going to happen through technology.
Okay, I want to talk about several things you touched on there, but I want to go back to first kind of this global mindset. And I think one of the things that make it lost a little bit is you talk about the U.S.'s position in the global market right now. If we can sell our oil or our gas to foreign countries around the world, it has the potential for a country who can buy the oil and gas from us, and it reduces their pressure from maybe having to buy it from Russia or a nation that they don't really align with, their values don't align, and they may align more with the U.S. And so all of a sudden, we have more countries around the world who are, wanting to buy from us, wanting to deal with us, and they don't have to deal with nations that they don't want to deal with. And if these nations are violent or promoting terrorism, it hurts those guys as well. So the impact here can be seen from a lot of different angles.
Well, sure it can, and it's from a positive light. There's the way you've described it, but I could take it one step further. Many people in this country believe that by exporting some of our natural resources, fuels, or finished products, that we might be weakening ourselves in terms of our own cost competitiveness for our own citizens, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It allows us to make investments. It allows us to grow our energy economy, strengthen it, make it more resilient, and have the ability to meet those global needs. And in the process of that scale and capability, we're also going to be serving ourselves much better as well. We refine nearly 20% of the world's global crude oil. But in our country, we've typically only of late gotten to about 10% of the refining capacity from our own crude supplies in this country. So we've been importing nearly half of our crude oil. And that number is considerably higher than it used to be even 10, 15 years ago. So what we're seeing is the ability to realize the strength and the resources, and in the process, creating jobs, growing our economy, making ourselves a net exporter of many of these products. And that's just good for the economy. It's good for our country. But as you suggested, it's also good for global stability as well.
Well, and I think one final thing on that point I would say is that, our politicians, and rightly so, have been accused of, bowing to the Saudis because of, we buy so much oil from them and we're dependent on them, or China owns so much of the U.S. debt. And, well, guess what? If we start selling our product to them, well, doesn't it kind of even the playing field or flip the script, if you will? And so it seems like we just kind of forget that people who are genuinely concerned about America and what influence our politicians, that if we can export and people are buying from us, then that same type of effect that we're worried about other nations having on us, we would have on them. And I'm not proposing that we go around and throw our leverage, manipulate the markets or anything. It's just a natural cause and effect thing, it would seem.
You would think so. And I think what we're seeing now is that the agenda here in this country in energy has largely been driven by regulations and regulatory concerns. Many of those concerns certainly grounded in fact, concerns about our future, and environmental responsibility being at the top of the list, but not to have our economy and our ability to grow our energy resources subservient to that. We need to quit apologizing for what it is we have in this country to offer ourselves and the rest of the world, and then put our minds to developing the technologies associated with those fuels and the ability to convert those fuels into products, plastics, electricity, fuels for all over the world. We have a phenomenal gift here. And our challenge is to put the technologies in place that can allow that to be realized. And so it absolutely is important. I think on another piece of data that's interesting, many people may not realize this, but you can export $1 of crude oil, or you can export $1 of some liquefied natural gas to an overseas country, and that'll generate $1 for the GDP. But if you take those fuels and convert them to finished products, like plastics,
right,
like the ability to make fuels, et cetera, the GDP multiplier on that can be as much as 10x or more in terms of our ability to generate revenues, jobs, et cetera. And that's the mindset we have to have here in this country, is we have a strength and we need to realize that strength.
Yeah, and I obviously agree with that. And I think the other thing is that I would like to push, and I've tried to push this on the show before, is that, if you go to countries that are developing or third world and you see people who don't have power, I want to get them energy, because energy, it equals life, right? If you don't have the access to power, then there's only so much medical attention that you can get, and your life will be shortened because you don't have access to that. There's only so much clean water you can get. We kind of put energy out here as it's this thing, and we need to debate over it. And I'm not saying we should not be environmentally responsible. That's not the point. The point is, though, is that energy brings life, and we have nations across the world that do not have, large portions of their population, rather, do not have access to power. And so it seems like, even if you wanted to push back on your argument about the 10x for the GDP and say, well, that's just negative, you're talking about money, there is a sense in which it's for the good of humanity that we get power, we get energy to people so they can live abundant lives.
Well, that's absolutely true, and I could take it one step further. It's probably the single most important aspect of geopolitical stability. When you have places in the world where people don't have things and they are not having their needs met, living in a medieval lifestyle, it affects every aspect of their life, including their ability to communicate, to be educated, to be influenced by terrorist cells, or however you may want to frame this discussion. But when people are not in the know and people are not getting the best quality of services, instability and the ability for divergent leadership to get into situations where people don't know any better or desperate for attention or services, well, then you have these situations where wars can erupt, and I could argue will erupt unless we're not able to see this as a means of the way the world is and should be, to your point. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's critical for us to look at it that way. And I think to go one step further, I think you have to understand where these people in the rest of the world are.
Right.
They're living in abject poverty. They don't have lights. They don't have anything. I'll give you a statistic. People in third world countries today, 1 out of 13 people every day dies from air pollution, but it's not air pollution we think about. It's indoor air pollution because they've got a little stove in their hut and they're cooking with wood or coal and they're breathing all the smoke that's inside their house because they don't have electricity.
Right.
I mean, these are the kinds of environmental challenges that many people in our country don't even think about because we're blessed with the world that we live in. But the world that those people are living in needs to have energy, to your point. And the way those demands are likely to be met over the next 50 some years anyway are through the continued use of coal, oil, and natural gas because they're the most abundant and affordable fuels that we have around the world. Now, the challenge is going to be for us to apply technologies that are accretive to the environmental footprint, accretive to those people's way of lives, so that they don't live through the lessons that we've learned as a society in terms of transforming our society with the use of fossil fuels. We can do it better. We have the ability to continue to invest in those kinds of technologies. And through that, we're going to make the world a better place.
No, and I agree with all that, obviously. I think one of the things I heard someone the other day say that sometimes, if you're making an argument and you make it about numbers or you make it about things, it might be true and it might be logical, but if you make it about people, it resonates more. And so that's one of the things that I've tried to do on this show is say, hey, we're talking about energy, and there is math that we can do for the GDP and stuff like that, and those are great and good arguments, and they work for me. I like that, but there's also this people angle, and sometimes we just remove people from energy, and we're not out here to make energy. We're not out here to make energy just to make energy. We're bringing energy for people, and so I just try to always connect it back to people because I think in the environment rather of the energy community, we get so hostile to each side if you're right or left, and you don't care about this, you don't care about this, and I think everyone would agree though we do care about people, and so let's always want to go back to that and not get lost on this because you talked about the environment, and that's really where it seems to boil down to is it's not so much about the GDP or this or that, it's about the environment and how do we bring these developing nations, get them access to power in an environmentally safe and responsible way, and I think this debate to me is very complicated and important because there's a lot of factors. You mentioned geopolitics. One of the things that I've seen is if you look at how microgrid technology is going into these areas where there is low access to power or no access to power, a lot of these, I say a lot, almost all these countries have state-owned electric power companies, and you're going to have a whole generation of people who are going to grow up not dependent on the government for their power. And so, they're going to have access to education and all this stuff because the power grid is going to change the way they live their lives. So that's going to influence the geopolitics. And on top of that, we're going to have debates over, well, what happens and how do we be environmentally responsible? Do we build a coal power plant? Do we build a natural gas power plant? Do we build oil? Do we ship it? Do we build refineries? And so just give me your perspective on how do we go about this in an environmentally responsible way, but we always remember that there are humans that we're getting this power to.
Yeah, well, let's think about the humans. First of all, if you look at a map of the world at night,
yes,
you take a look at all the places in the world where it's absolutely just black. There's not any light at all. And then you do correlations in terms of people's GDP, their way of life. Great example is the comparison and contrast in Korea between North and South Koreans. Same people, same genes, everything. North Korean would be typically 2 to 3 inches shorter, 20 pounds lighter, and live about 10 years less than somebody in the South. That's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And it gets right to the issue of your people thing. I think the other point that's stunning to me is populations around the world are changing dramatically. Indonesia has almost as many people as the United States. The population of Nigeria will exceed the United States within the next 30 to 40 years. These are places in the world where, in many instances, people don't have energy. Now, that's where the shift is going to be. If we believe that our energy and environmental regulations and policies are going to create leadership around the world, the only way that can be realized is through technological transformation. It's not going to be realized by conserving, because many people in this country believe that conservation is the key. Our country is not going to write the environmental footprint for the world 100 years from now. Our country can provide leadership in terms of technology, and that's really what I believe our mission needs to be. It'll not only make our lives better, but certainly the global community that you just talked about. I think at the end of the day, people around the world are going to always want the next best thing for their family and their future. That usually means, first and foremost, they want to have availability of energy to make their world better. Then they want to improve their economic conditions. And then finally, they'll have the ability to embrace the environmental responsibility. And I think we need to remember that when we think about people in developing countries. We can't impose our own lens of how we see the world in terms of where we might be somewhere else in the world with different decision makers and different concerns. And these people will drive forward. Best thing I believe we can do is give them the technology to drive forward to meet all of those needs and realize that future that they're so excited about, and give them the technology to enable them to do that.
Yeah, and I've had more than one person from that's in not in the U.S., but I don't want to throw out country names here, but in the government, high up in the government, has told me that the biggest hindrance to getting their people power is regulations on their environment that are more strict or as strict as the U.S. government's EPA, and they can't build the infrastructure because they don't have the money and the assets and the resource to deal with EPA-type regulations in a developing nation. And so to your point, I've heard this from people in government around the world who say, God, we're not anti-environment, but these regulations that our government has adopted from hearing from the U.S. or from wherever, they're just too stringent. And so now we have blackouts. We can't get power to people because we're just not equipped to deal with this type of regulatory body yet.
Well, that's right. And that's the level of maturity of an economy and a people and a nation. And I think it also gets into this whole concept, even in our own country, to apply broad rules across the nation or across the world. The differences are stunning. The ability to meet people's needs are considerably different from place to place. And so I think that needs to be considered. But the part, again, back to technology and not to overbeat this drum, but all of these issues become rather moot if you're able to transform and magically create technology solutions that make the argument moot. Right. If you can do it cleaner and you can do it better, why wouldn't you? That usually means you're going to be accretive, not only in terms of your economics, but also in your environmental footprint. And that's the definition of continuing to get better. Getting better by suffering in your environmental footprint, or for that matter, making something so unaffordable that you can't achieve it, that's not sustainability. You have to be able to drive it forward and be mindful of all the elements of energy sustainability.
Absolutely. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on today. I've really enjoyed this discussion, and a lot of good meat here, I think, for the listeners. So I want to give you a chance to plug or promote anything that you'd like to, where people can connect with you or find out more information about you or what's going on at Rice there. So just go ahead and let the listeners know, and we'll link to everything that you described for us in the show notes.
Well, that'd be great. We're very proud of our energy and environment initiative here at Rice, and you can access it through the Rice website by going to eei.rice.edu. In there, in that website, you'll see all of the reach in terms of the areas that we focus on for students, for faculty, for the external community, for our ability to be involved with all of the aspects of transformative technology, policy, and the entire realm and region of energy and our environment. You know, we use two words to define our energy and environment initiative: relevance and impact. And there's so many things that are going on all over the world that if you apply that litmus test of relevance and impact, therein lies what will move the needle. We're working on relevance and impact every day within our energy and environment initiative. And that touches the oil and gas community. It touches the energy community writ large that we're involved in. And it certainly drives toward transformative environmental technologies that are accretive to our businesses, our economy, our people, and jobs in the nation that we're living in here and globally. So appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and thanks for the opening.
All right. Well, for the listeners, we will link to all of that in the show notes. And Chuck, thanks again for coming on, and we'd love to have you on again in the future.
Great. Love to do it.
Thanks again to Charles for coming on. Really enjoyed the discussion and look forward to having him on again in the future. Be sure to check out Rice University and all the stuff they have going on. We will link to that in the show notes as well. The Global Energy Leaders Podcast is produced by Michael Sims and Chris Prine. Chris Prine also serves as editor for the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. Until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.